What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, talking about 5 or 6 awesome, competitively viable tech cards that are still really good but don't see a lot of play. These are cards that I feel like are kind of lost and forgotten but still hold a whole lot of potential and can make your deck a lot better. These are actually cards that in previous formats you could even say were dominant, and some people thought that some of these cards were ban worthy, but for whatever reason, recently they've just kind of fallen off the face of the earth. I still think that there is so much potential in these cards, and I just want to go ahead and discuss them. And let me just say, because of the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of played right now, and because of the speed of the game, whether going into YCS Atlanta, Spiral is still the big dominant deck because maybe we haven't gotten a ban list, maybe Pendulum Magicians end up, taking the crown because of a ban list, or maybe Pendulum Magicians with Electromite is just too strong for Spirals, whatever the case. I feel like right now there's kind of been a line drawn in the sand, and I feel like there are two ways to get the most out of your deck competitively. I feel like you either have to be able to play at that kind of breakneck speed that Spiral and Pendulum Magicians can play at, where obviously if they get the right hand, they can go all in turn one. Spiral, it resolves double helix and pretty much off to the races from there. They put the sleeper on board with the last resort, and it's like good luck dealing with that. Or I feel like you kind of have to be able to just stun your opponent perpetually. If you look at like the best invoked decks right now, I believe there was an invoked, it may have been like the Philadelphia Regional, where the guy was just running a billion hand traps and a whole bunch of defensive cards, and he was able to just slow the game down every single turn and play that way. I feel like if you're trying to play the middle ground, it's just going to a lot of times be unsuccessful, and this is kind of like, these cards are more suited towards the latter. These are not suited towards being able to play at the Pendulum Magician or Spiral kind of pace. So the first card I want to talk about is Traptrix Myrmilio, and really, like all the Trap Hole and Traptrix cards in general, this is an engine that you guys know a few years ago. You're talking about Hat formats, and when Hat won the North American WCQ, it was a super dominant deck. Being able to add that Trap Hole was really good because you know that you had one of your opponent's big summons countered. I feel like Bottomless Trap Hole going to 1 has not really killed this engine. I do understand that, Traptrix have gotten another Searcher, and these cards are a little bit magnets for, Ash Blossom, which so many decks in Yu-Gi-Oh run, but I feel like Trap Holes in general are being very undervalued right now. Maybe Bottomless isn't as strong as it used to be, but if you look at some of these Trap Holes, like Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare, let's just be real here. If you're playing against a meta deck and you have nightmare sets, there's like a 90% chance that your opponent is going to give you an opportunity to activate this card on their first turn. Your opponent is either going to go in for double helix, or your opponent is going to summon a Spiral super agent that you can obviously Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare that. There's also, if your opponent tries to go into Electromite, that's an amazing card to just nightmare. Hell, even if your opponent does something like they summon Astrograph Sorcerer, being able to stop that guy and search his search, like, I'll definitely take that as a 1-for-1. So I feel like these are very good cards, and if you're able to wall up, this can be really, really strong. Start with a couple of Trap Holes. Maybe you have something like Space Time Trap Hole or Time Space Trap Hole. I know it does cost a lot of life points, but it does stop all of those link summons, and it can stop a massive Pendulum summon where if you would strike those monsters, a lot of times those monsters like Purple Poison do end up activating. So a lot of times it can be safer to use Time Space Trap Hole. So I feel like the Traptrix engine it's forgotten about, but I don't think it's all that bad. And never forget that Traptrix Dianera, it is a kind of one card rank 4, and that rank 4 being Traptrix Rafflesia is still really good, especially if you can bring back Myrmilio and pop one of your opponent's Pendulum Scales at the same time. The next card up is Heavy Duststorm. This card came out not too long ago in Code of the Duelist. This one did not take off as much as I thought it would. I thought that this would be kind of the saving grace of slower decks because at its core, it is a +1. I know it gives up your battle phase, but in a lot of these slower decks like Crawlers and Outergeist and Paleo Frogs, like, you don't really do that much damage in your battle phase anyway, so giving up your battle phase potentially to take out 2 of your opponent's spells and traps is definitely worth it in my opinion, especially when you consider that this can take out a full completed Pendulum scale, even if your opponent isn't running a Pendulum based deck, just about all these meta decks are running field spells. We know that. We've spoken ad nauseum about how powerful field spells are. So even in matchups where you think it wouldn't be all that strong, you're still going to have the opportunity to hit a Trickstar Light Stage or a Spiral Resort or an ABC Union Hanger. Like, being able to just go 1-for-1 with your opponent's field spell is something that you definitely have to consider, because if you stop that field spell, you're going to slow your opponent down significantly. I think that this card also in decks like Paleo, the fact that it is a trap actually is a bonus, because not only during your opponent's turn can you end up hitting a couple of their back row cards, getting that +1, but then you also could possibly get a Paleo monster out of your graveyard. I do think that it is being a little outshined by Unending Nightmare, because Unending Nightmare does hit those same field spells, and obviously it can crack Pendulum Zones as well. But this card doesn't cost any life points, so if you're playing a bunch of Solemns, you never have to worry about going into the danger zone as quickly as you would if you were playing something like Heavy Duststorm. So definitely still a very solid card, especially for these slower decks that don't want to give up the discard for something like Twin Twister. I know that it is not immediate, but if you're planning on going first, then obviously it's a card that you still want to keep in. If you're not going first, probably just side it out. The next one is a card that I absolutely love, and again, it surprises me that no one really talks about this card. It is Card of Demise. So I recently put this in my Altergeist deck. It has been so amazing. Now, this is probably the biggest target in my entire deck for Ash Blossom, but if you do not get Ash Blossom, this card is so good. I feel like any deck right now in Yu-Gi-Oh that cannot turbo probably needs to be looking at Card of Demise. I mean, at its core, it is still a potential +2. That is too good for a lot of these slower decks. I know that some of them kind of maybe need the special summon like Paleo to get into Totally Awesome, but the thing about it is, if your deck can play defense enough, if you're like Altergeist or Trap Tricks or Paleo, where you have a plethora of traps to defend yourselves, like Card of Demise is that card that can keep up. It can basically keep up the pace with a lot of the faster decks, where you can now afford to get 1-for-1s with all your trap cards, because when you activate the Card of Demise, if it doesn't get Ash Blossom, you're jumping so far ahead of your opponent. Again, not being able to special summon, not being able to do battle damage isn't really that big of a deal. It also lets you get really good, it lets you get really good value out of potential 1-for-1s like Raigeki and Dark Hole. Best case scenario, those cards are blowouts against your opponent, but even if you Raigeki your opponent as a 1-for-1, you're still going plus, because Card of Demise is giving you 3 cards for 1. This is a card that I believe will actually see some play in the future. We just got the Counter Fairy Structure deck. I know that got a little hurt with the Guiding Ariadne not being as strong, because it does eat up maybe a spot that you'd put a trap there, but there are so many decks in the game right now that I definitely think should be playing Card of Demise. I feel like the only one that people kind of pay attention to right now is like the True Draco deck, because the True Draco deck is the one Demise deck that can still do a ton of damage maybe before they activate Card of Demise or in the following turn, and they have Masterpiece, so obviously the spotlight's going to be on them. The next card is actually 2 cards that act very similarly. I know why these cards fell out of favor. I feel like it is entirely because of Spiral and the field spell. Spiral Resort that doesn't let you target them. The cards are Lost Wind and Breakthrough Skill. So these are 2 cards that I believe in a lot. I think I like Breakthrough Skill a little more than Lost Winds. In fact, I'm main decking it in my Altergeist. If you guys saw the match that I had against DZ that he uploaded, you know that in game 2, Breakthrough Skill put in that work. He had Totally Awesome on the field. I negated it during my turn. I was able to kill the Totally Awesome with Eater of Millions, and then that was pretty much a wrap. I like this card because not only do you get that first negation, which can be very useful. Let's just say your opponent summons a Candina or a Joker. They use one of their like Stratos-like monsters. Okay, you can just negate that. I'll definitely take that neg1 to know that you're really not going to be getting your deck going. But then if they happen to put a monster that's kind of like a Stunish type monster, or a monster that's difficult, or maybe they put something like a Lycoris on the field later, something that you're going to be taking huge burn damage from because maybe they have Reincarnation, you can activate Breakthrough Skill, you can negate that Lycoris. I'm not taking any damage now, and I'll definitely take that. If they put like a number 41 on the field or a Borlo Dragon where it's hard to kill that thing, you can negate negate it, you stop its ability to, shrink your monsters down, and you can maybe use some targeting effects against it. I do understand that a lot of people are hesitant to play targeting traps because of Spiral, but that's kind of the only matchup where I feel like this card is unplayable. Against Lost Wind is another strong one. I think Lost Wind is especially good in decks like Paleo because being able to actually activate the card twice means more opportunities to summon your Paleo monsters. This is really good because not only does it stop the extra deck monsters, the Heavy Metaphors, Electromites, and other big monsters like Borreload, etc., but at the same time, it can be used during the damage step. And if you have viable defenders, maybe you're playing a deck like Crawlers, if your opponent tries to attack, you can actually use this in the damage step. A lot of the Crawler monsters have pretty significant defense, especially when you add them with the field spell. So these are cards that you can not only use effectively twice, but then there are also cards that, hey, maybe you pair them with Card Demise. If you have to discard them during the end phase because your back row is already loaded, it's not that big of a deal because you get dual utility in the graveyard. I understand that Spiral make these cards kind of difficult to play, but if Spiral gets hit, I feel like you gotta consider playing these cards again. And then the last card I want to talk about is an old favorite of mine, Thunder King Ryo. This is a really good card. I think it's kind of situational because it is a little matchup dependent, and I don't think Thunder King Ryo is main deck worthy, but I believe that it is side deck worthy, especially if you know you're going first. If you play this against Pendulum Magicians and Trickstar, those are the two matchups that I'm specifically targeting. I think Ryo gives you a lot of value, man, because not only do those decks search a ton, they perpetually search, but they also don't have easy outs to this card because their core monsters, their Stratos monsters are both 1800, so your opponent will not be able to use Terraforming. They will not be able to use Duos Alliance. If they summon their Scroll Combat Joker or their Trickstar Candina, well, I'd imagine they wouldn't summon those, but not only can they not use those monsters, but they're both 1800. Ryo can just laugh at those. Those decks might have one card that's like inherently able to out it, I guess something like Purple Poison and her ability to blow up a monster, but that's kind of it. Or you could say, I guess, Trickstar might have Eater of Millions. I believe that Thunder King Ryo can trade himself for Eater of Millions, and usually they kind of have to go for like gimmicky plays to get Ryo off board. So if you have like a Thunder King Ryo and a Strike or a Mirror Force or a Bottomless to back him up, this is a card that can kind of be a win condition against those decks because he just stops their searching, and these decks need searching, and if they put a bigger monster on board, you have that back row to kind of back you up to take that monster out, and Thunder King Ryo can just guide you to victory. It might stop one or two cards in your deck, but believe me, you're stopping way more in your opponent's deck. So these are just some of the cards that I've been thinking about. I feel like as much as people want to tell you otherwise, I do not believe that anti-meta is dead, and I think with cards like this, we can rise up, brothers. So let me know what you guys think. I just felt like talking about this because I do feel like these cards are extremely solid. I feel like we have a whole bunch of cards that are kind of like 8s and 9s out of 10, but we all kind of forget how good they are. Card of Demise is a 10 out of 10. Like, that card is utterly ridiculous. But whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already. Turn on that notification bell for daily videos.